All right. Well, thank you, Dan, for allowing us a little bit of time here to share some information about the Oregon ACES program. Scott and 7SS is here with me to back me up if I forget something or don't get the right answer in there. Scott's ready to jump in and help me clarify things. Before I go any further, I do want to say thank you to all the veterans. Certainly appreciate you, and I love this country. Thank you for your service. Tonight, I just want to walk through a little bit of how we came about, how the ACES program came about, and show you some sample content in our training program and explain the structure of it, and then answer any questions you have about it. So I will jump right in here. Myself and Dan Smith, KK7DS, were both teaching different ARES units at the same time, and we were comparing notes a little bit and realized that we saw some issues with how things were going, and we thought we could maybe find a way to make things work better. At the time we were doing this, we figured out that there wasn't a hands-on course for amateur radio operators and emergency communications with a practical component at all. We were trying to do this within our separate ARES units at the time, but kind of doing the same thing with no consistent course that we could share back and forth. We had both completed the ARRL program, Emergency Communications Program, at that time, and noticed that it didn't require us to ever use our radio. And in my case, my mentor allowed me to take the test about halfway through and get my certificate without even finishing the rest of the program. And we thought maybe we could find a way to spruce that up just a little bit. So we started developing this program. The other thing that happened at that time is we were getting ideas or questions from several emergency managers about response groups. There was some political issues with ARES and several of the emergency managers. So when we first started the program, we were looking at maybe seeing if we could add an option for response groups to participate for various counties. So what the program is now is a structured training program. It consists of a set of PowerPoint slides. Each of those slides have instructor's notes that have good content and references in there for the slides. So if you are an instructor, but you may not be as familiar with this particular topic, you can read the instructor's notes and get the additional information in there, see where the content came from. It includes a student workbook that is a workbook copy of the slides with additional information. There are classroom exercises. So once you learn a key skill or feature or something new, you get the opportunity in the classroom to exercise that so that we see that you've actually learned it. Like all good courses, there is a test, and we have a multiple choice 40-question test that is at the end of the course in order to gain the certificate. Along with that, since most of the content had to do with skills that you should have and be able to demonstrate as an amateur radio operator doing emergency communications, we have a practical evaluation. And this is looked at, it's kind of varied a little bit over the years and how we've got it dialed in. You can think of it as a task book type thing if you wish, with very similar content or the exact content as some of the Oxcom task book. Just a way to get the students up to get their skills up to getting that signed off. And when you're done with the course, if you pass these things, you are issued a certificate of completion. So when we put this together, we wanted it to be like the ICS type courses and like Oxcom. We wanted it to be portable so that wherever it was delivered and to whomever, it was the same content. That was the thing we saw lacking in what we were doing in ARES at the time, which was developing our own content by county or by state. So we wanted something that was standardized. Also, we didn't want it to be for any specific group. When we first put this together, it was fairly driven with some Oregon content. And once we got involved with Scott and the folks in Washington and saw that maybe it would serve a wider audience, we de-Oregonized it and took the Oregon content out and made it all neutral, so that we've had folks from the Navy, Coast Guard Auxiliary, CERT, hospital support groups, dispatchers, National Guard, had all kinds of folks through it. And it's been a content that doesn't conflict back and forth between different groups or agencies. So again, it's a standardized tool that anyone can use, modeled after ICS course type distribution, and they can teach their own folks with these basic communication skills. What it is not a club or an organization that one can join. It is not an emergency response team or a response group of any kind. And it's not competition for Auxcom, it's complementary to the Auxcom program. And we did it in a couple of steps, starting with basic, starting with new operators perhaps, or folks that haven't had a lot of experience yet, and then moving into the advanced curriculum, which we had a little struggle with. I'll talk about that. So how did we come up with the content? We get asked where this came from. The first thing we did is we went to numerous emergency managers in Oregon and asked them what types of skills and training they would like to see for their amateur radio operators. And we got a fair amount of input from a lot of folks. We also asked what kind of certification role could this serve that would help them reduce their liability. Any volunteer group or any organized group working for a county or a municipality adds some liability to that county. And we said, can we help by getting some training standardized with a certificate that you can put in that person's file, and now you've got some backup. They've had the required training. So that was also where some of the content was driven from. We wanted it to be peer reviewed by folks that we worked with, so we solicited ARES groups in Oregon and Washington State and said, what could we put in here that would work for you guys? And how should we develop this so that you can take this material, hand it off to your instructors, and teach it locally? That was kind of where we went to develop this material. Someone's got an open mic. Thank you. So we involved instructors from Oregon and Washington. We spent a fair amount of time developing the slides, the handouts, exercises, and a workbook, and put that together. And it was reviewed by the Oregon Emergency Management folks. And we said, how's this look to you? And they said, this looks like a great solution, great training program. Go ahead and do what you'd like with it. We also took it to the Oregon Emergency Management Association, where we were awarded granted an award for the development of the program. And then to push it out the door and get it out there where folks could use it, we developed a train the trainer module just to hand this off to existing instructors that were already teaching in their local units so that they could teach this class locally. Along the way, we made a little change in direction. The original design, as I said, was to have a response group component or a structure to complement RACES. Still remains some fair communication gaps about what you can and can't do as a RACES group. And for emergency managers that chose not to use ARES for political reasons, or they were struggling with their group, they wanted to do a RACES type structure, and we tried to make a program that would fit that. Once the Auxcom concept came out and the class came out as a solution, we abandoned that group concept and just focused on the training materials and delivering a training program. So once we started delivering this, it was done in Oregon to multiple counties, handed off to Washington up in Scott's area, and taught through multiple counties up there. And then Scott and I went down to California and handed it off where it was taught down there as well. And since we've started, we've had 951 students complete the course and earn the certificate. We initially made the certificate valid for 3 years. We're kind of rethinking how that really works. It might not be that practical. We just thought it should have some kind of a time limit. I think everybody's dealt with that person that said, yes, I got my certificate 28 years ago and nothing has changed since then. That's not the business we're in. So after some point, there needs to be some retraining or some re-upping on that. So we're still working on how we're going to deal with that. If we'll keep that 3 years limit or maybe make that a little longer. So the Train the Trainer program, as much as we enjoy teaching this material, we don't have the time to head all over the country and teach it. So the idea was to be able to walk in with a box with all the materials in it and help the instructor deliver a course locally. So our Train the Trainer concept means the local instructor needs to attend and complete the course. So they have actually done the material, seen the material, and done the exercises. We have a little bit of paperwork for them to fill out with ACES to be an instructor. They're granted access to our website for the instructor materials where they can download all the slides and handouts. And then that instructor plans, organizes, and delivers the program for their individual unit or group, wherever they want to do that. When we first started this, there were some things we just wanted to make sure that we identified as key values in our training program. We did want to get the content out there to be reviewed by the people that we work with. Doesn't make any sense for 4 of us to sit in a room and develop content only to find out that that's not what our folks would like to see. We wanted to make sure, just like the Oxcom program that and most of the ICS courses, that a workbook comes with the course that has all the materials in it. So we developed and printed that workbook to go with the course. I'm pretty picky about achievable chapter objectives. When you take the training, that objective needs to be something you can actually wrap your hands around and do to show me that you've done that. So every chapter has objectives for the chapter, and the student needs to learn the material so they can accomplish those objectives. Every chapter's got an exercise at the end that is mostly applicable to the content. So once you take the training in that chapter, get the material, you do an exercise so that you can make sure you demonstrate that you've learned that material. We wanted to make sure there's a written evaluation. It's just a very accountable way that the material's been delivered and some of it's stuck, enough of it stuck that they can write it down or at least select the correct answers to give it back. We were concerned about the affordability of it. We set a price of $25 per student per class when we first started this, but it's been more than 12 years. Obviously, once we get out of this pandemic situation and we're back in a classroom, we're going to have to reevaluate how that works. Things cost more money now. But we didn't want it to end up being $100 a person or something that wasn't practical for folks to take. We wanted to encourage discussion on the local structure. Most of these courses that we've taught may be primarily one county group or municipal group, but there's also other folks from out of the area that come in to take the class. So there may be multiple different units represented there. We wanted to make sure that we asked for local input. So every chapter's got a slide in there to find out what the folks in the class are doing in their area, to make that clear. And again, practical evaluation on the key skills. We're going to make sure you know how to program your radio. We want to actually see you program your radio.
Darren, on the affordable part, we've had a bunch of agencies. I don't know how much, I think you've experienced this too. A number of agencies have actually just covered all of our expenses. So they basically, whoever enrolls in the class has been free to certainly to their own team members and oftentimes just to everybody that shows up. We've had some, one of them actually had they actually brought in like the local culinary group to actually service lunches and
Oh, wow.
stuff. I think that was, so you missed out on that one, but that's certainly, if anybody's willing to do that, we're definitely ready to show up, right?
Sure. And yeah, for us and our little coastal community here, I just give my bill to the emergency manager after the class with the roster, and the county reimburses us for it. And they've offered to have the jail cater food, but it's really not the kind of food I'm looking for. So we've kind of passed that up so far. So there's basically the structure: introduction to communication, emergency communications, programming and operating. We go over the different groups that provide this service and the served agencies that they serve to try to identify those. Hit some basic communication skills. We talk about equipment selection. Lots of times folks aren't sure what the difference is between various radios and whether they should get a handheld first and then a mobile, or whether they need the mobile and not the handheld. So we go over that. We delve into some public safety systems because, as we found out, we're ham radio operators, but it's quite likely we're going to be using commercial or public safety radios as well. So getting some knowledge on that, what those are, and the systems that are out there is helpful. We dive into a little bit of mapping and GPS use. Almost anytime you do anything, you're going to have to go from one place to another, and it's going to involve a map or a GPS if you're not familiar with the area. So cover that. Just a little bit about the ICS system and where we fit into that. We talk about activation and response. This is one of the units where it's different every class you do, depending on what group you have. We find out how they get activated, where they respond to, if they're allowed to respond without being activated, what the rules are. Weather and situational awareness. We do a basic message handling chapter, and then we do a basic messaging exercise where we send and receive formal traffic back and forth between, everybody gets to send one and receive one message using the proper pro words and using ITU phonetics. And that usually frustrates people the first time around. Once they catch on and get it, they're very happy to be able to get a message across accurately and spell things out. Regardless of what your deployment is, we felt that you're always going to have to troubleshoot something. So we spend a little time with troubleshooting and field operations, and talk a little bit about communications integrity, remembering that we are the handlers of the message. Often it's important that it get to the other side 100% without us interfering with that, and we need to use whatever tools are necessary to do that. So we spend a little time talking about that, including HIPAA concerns. And we do that 40-question multiple choice test and skills demonstration where we check off your ability to do these various functions. I'm going to go back for just a second. This started out as a 24-hour program. We started with basically 16 chapters, and then an 8-hour day of the test and the practical skills practice and demonstration. And I still think that was a fairly decent structure for working with these people and getting them enough information and some actual experience to be comfortable. The problem was in handing that off to an area, it was tougher because we couldn't do it in a weekend. It was either 3 days or it took longer to get that delivered. So in this revision, we've narrowed this down a little bit to make it easy to deliver in a full weekend. And it can be taught 1 chapter at a time, 2 chapters a night, 4 chapters an afternoon, however you want to structure. But when we hand it off to an area, if we actually go there and hand it off, it's easily done in a weekend. We did build the advanced course after that. And what we found was we were just too optimistic in what we thought we could put together. It turned out to be too technical and tough to deliver in the time frame that we had. We wanted people to be able to solder a connector on the end of a piece of coax and do some of those skills that you should be able to do in the field. Unfortunately, bringing 20 soldering stations into the hospital conference room and trying to do something like that just didn't turn out something that was easy to work with. So we will revise this after we get this basic revision done that we're working on right now. Slim that down to a weekend, and that'll be HF, WinLink, digital modes, other things that we couldn't fit in the first basic program. So this is the basic structure of the chapter for all the chapters. Starts with an outline with objectives. We have a slide called "Why is this important?" Where we try to identify, try to connect with the students and say, hey, you know, this is, here's why this material could be very important to what you're doing. And there's usually something in there that clicks for students that they say, oh, I understand now why I should know this. So that's included in every chapter. Definitions, new terms, abbreviations, acronyms. We're in a field where there's all kinds of 3-letter and 4-letter things that stand for other things. So we try to get that right up front. Anything in the chapter that we're going to identify with a new term or definition or acronym, we announce those first so the student knows what those are. Then we deliver the content, and then we have a slide called the local connection, which is some specific questions on the material or the area that we're teaching in that chapter, where we get the students to tell us what works for them in their area. And this is often starts out to be a 2 or 3 minute quick thing and can easily go 5 or 10 minutes, where the students are, well, in our group, we do this, we use this kind of radio, and we always have these at our station, and everything comes in a suitcase, or whatever it is. But it's a great time to involve different people around the table, sharing that information, and for us to learn what each unit is doing. And then we have review questions at the end of the chapter. It's usually 5 to 8 review questions. And from all those review questions, we use that as a pool to draw the 40 questions out for the final exam. So all the exam questions at the end of the course you've seen in each chapter as you're going through it. And we do try to include the ICS forms as much as we can, so folks get chances, get some time practicing with those. For example, we start out, excuse me, making sure they have an ICS 214, and we help them get started with that. We tell them that that form is going to be turned in at the end of the class when they're done with their test results. And so we want them to make notes during class. When chapter 1 is done and you got a break, just write the date, time, what took place right there. Start using that form and get used to using that whenever you're doing anything with this. Okay, I'm just going to step through some sample content from a couple different chapters. It's not all the same chapter, but just to show you those slides that are consistently in there. The sample outline. We're comparing the different types of radios, talking a little bit about frequency selection, fair amount of time on DC power, batteries, cables, connectors, fuses, and then spend some time with different types of antennas and choices. These are the objectives for that chapter. And that's why this is important. Usually something on here jogs their memory, the student's memory a little bit, like, oh, I see, proper wiring of the fuses makes it safe. I got it. So I won't burn my radio equipment up or burn my car up with the wire that I put in there because I didn't put a fuse on it. So we just try to make sure that they understand why we're sharing this material, not just that you need to get 6 chapters, but it's important stuff that can help you. Acronyms, abbreviations, new terms, things coming up in this chapter that we may rattle off. We may just say duty cycle without explaining it first, so we get it out front here where they get a chance to see that. Then the content starts, and it's a variety of text-based bullet point items and illustrations like this, where we're showing the difference in weight between a linear power supply and a switching power supply. If you were going to choose one of those to put in your box that you had to carry over to the EOC and set up, you might be thinking about that 5-pound weight. It might be a little easier than the 46 pounds. It's another illustrated slide on fusing. There's a lot of material on there, but again, this is all in the workbook as well. So the student has all that. We don't have to go over every color on the slide. It's already in the workbook for them to refer to as well. And here's one on antennas where we just talk about directional antennas and the patterns, some of the features of them, as well as a little pattern illustration. This is another one on portable antennas. We try to have examples or samples of these. I can tell you that my experience has been the more props I bring, the better the class delivery goes. So I've always got one of these antennas that can be passed around and people can see it, understand how it hooks up to their radio. This is one of my favorite ones. I always thought that folks just had a pretty good knowledge of how to work a multimeter. I found out that's not necessarily the case. We typically buy a box or a case of the cheap ones at Harbor Freight or somewhere for $5 or $6 a piece when they're on sale. And we can put 10 or 12 of them around the table very easily to allow the student to measure voltage. I usually have a couple of batteries we pass around, some fuses that you can't see the element, whether it's burned out or not. So they've got to determine whether it's a good fuse or a bad fuse. We've usually got some coax cables that have some internal damage, so we don't know whether they work or don't work until they go through it with the meter. So we just take some time doing those troubleshooting and setup kind of things so that they can have a little more comfort with the products. And there's a sample review question that there's, like I said, 5 to 8 at the end of the chapter every time we go through those. And then we pull several from each chapter for that final exam at the end. And here's an example of one of the exercises. At this point, we'd put up a line from an ICS 217 or a 205, giving them frequency and tone information. Ask them to program their radio. For this one, we probably put up 4 or 6 frequencies, have the students number off 1 through 6 as you go around the room, and then have all the number ones use channel 1, for example, and program their radios. And then they identify with their call sign, find the other auxiliary communicators that are on the same frequency, and then log their call sign, hometown, and served agency of the other folks you talk to. So right there, we're going to get a little information on that 214, and they're also going to have a 309 there where they're logging their communications on that. So we're using a 217 or a 205, 309, 214, one I missed. Anyway, we have those ICS forms in their hands so that they use those throughout the course, so they get a chance to get those signed off. Then when they've completed that, we sign that off in their task book or on the form that's there to be completed. One thing that really makes this class work well is taking the props, as I said. I usually have got a couple of handheld radios, several different brands if possible, a mobile VHF, UHF radio set up in there. Even though we're not teaching anything HF, I'll often have, as I did here, an HF setup. Find that at lunchtime, turning that on and hearing things around the country or around the world are kind of interesting to folks that are just getting started in this. A good encouragement to get involved with upgrading your license so that you can use more of the features. Most of the venues that I deliver are in a U-shaped environment like this with the tables. Seems to work very well for the students to work with each other and see each other in the room. You can see there's a bunch of materials up on the table there that can be passed around to show them. The class size does make a difference. This is the handoff in Snohomish, I believe, Scott, I think. And there's quite a few folks. We had a pretty good sized group there. But again, that U-shaped table environment seemed to work very well. Folks were able to interact, and honestly, looking forward to getting back into the classroom environment instead of Zoom, because this time with the folks working with each other is very valuable and very productive for them. What we found out is types of handheld radios that people bring to the class. There's a couple that I'd almost send them home if they bring them, because they're just almost impossible to program by hand, it seems like. But we find folks get sat down in their classroom environment, and after the first radio programming exercise, there's usually a little shuffle. People that have the same radio tend to flock over to the same area. They'll move their seating assignment and go sit by somebody that has the same radio they have, so that they can learn the skills from them. And it's always a reward to see students helping other students. The instructor's there to guide them, but to have them help each other and just discover these things and master the skill is very good.
We do require that the students bring their own radios to class. And I have a VX1R that I threaten everyone with. If you don't bring a radio, you get to program that one. Because
no, give them the whoosh on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. You learn right away what's out there, what is easy to explain and what isn't. This particular one, the gentleman on the left here is fairly experienced with the radio. You'll notice the operator here on the right, that there is the box on the table. I think that's a Yaesu VX8 maybe, or 7. She got her license. They said you should buy this radio. She bought it and put it on the shelf for a rainy day when she was needed. And so her first time that she used this was as she came to class. We gave her a battery from one of our radios and put hers on the charger. And by the end of the class, she could program that thing, save memory channels, and could actually use it properly. So that's the goal, is to get this information out there in their hands and have them demonstrate their ability to do it. So how is this class delivered if we hand it off to you, or if you want to deliver it in your area? Basically, we look for a sponsoring agency or group, and it can be your ARES group, or your ACES group, or a CERT group, or the county, or whatever group it is. Kind of sponsors and takes care of setting this up and secures a venue, some kind of a classroom environment where you can do this. We list the class on our website, and as an instructor signed up, you can create that information on the website. When we list it on there, that creates a few forms in the background. So as students go to the website and sign up, it builds a class roster for the instructor. So based on the number of students they're prepared for, the instructor orders the student workbooks. In the past, we've drop shipped those. I believe this next round is probably going to be, the books will be available on Amazon, so the instructor can just go to Amazon, click on 20 books, and place the order. Then the sponsor or the instructor collects the fee from the students and uses that money to pay for the workbooks that they just ordered on Amazon. And also, we'd like to see you take care of the students' refreshments a little bit, if at all possible. I'm kind of a big believer in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If I'm not comfortable and don't feel safe and secure, and I'm not hydrated and fed, I'm probably not going to learn very well. So it's important that we set the venue up correctly and comfortably for the students, and then make sure that we get them some refreshments so that they can relax and enjoy the material. Then you deliver the course, administer the test and the practical exercise portion. The instructor then completes that student roster online on the website, and that causes certificates to be emailed to all the students that were successful. And I'm done talking. Let Scott talk for a minute and field some questions.
So one of the things we ran into when we did the update is, well, we had a bunch of questions. Of course, a lot of these things we kind of answered locally, but it would be nice to have a little more broad-based response. And what I want to do is, one of the questions that we had, the previous course was based on the ARRL, well, the message handling portion of the course was based on the ARRL radiogram. And we used it primarily because it has a nice, well-defined structure and there's a set of rules for passing it. What we found though in the class was that one, the rules were complicated for people and it got in the way of actually handling the message traffic. And two, and it just seems less and less likely, or at least locally here for us, and I think probably for Darren in Oregon as well, it certainly seems less and less likely that people will actually be interacting with a radiogram. So we started looking at just kind of teaching the ICS 213 form and using that as our message handling exercise. But I wanted to actually ask, like, how many people are still actually using, or if, I don't know how common that is, and outside our areas, I mean, I have a pretty good idea in Washington State, and but we wanted to get a little more broad feedback. So I'm going to post a link in the chat, and if you would be willing to take a minute or so at some point here, maybe while we're answering questions, to respond, it would be much appreciated. I think it'd be fascinating for us to find out what people are actually using. And
I'm going to back up just a little bit while Scott's filling that out. One thing that we has been a blessing, I guess, for us in developing this is we have a non-sighted ham in our group that is very good at radio operating and message handling. And when we first produced the material, I ran it by him to see how his screen reader would do to share the material with him. So we've worked, every time we do a revision or a change, I run this by him, try to get the illustrations with a note somehow so that those that are non-sighted can still go through the material, gather as much information as they can. Obviously, the screen reader on his computer can't describe the screen, the illustration completely, but it does a pretty good job of giving him the information. And likewise, I'm going to share something in the chat. If you want to go take a look afterwards at how this works, I've got a little YouTube video of him copying a message over the radio where he is punching out Braille letters on a piece of cardstock. And if you see this, he's got to have the cardstock upside down, and he's got a little stylus and a punch, and he's punching Braille letters upside down from right to left, receiving the message, and then flips it back over and reads the Braille to get the message back. And he got it 100% received and transmitted to somebody else. So no whining about having to write down something on the IS2 or on the 213, because it can be done by anybody, regardless of what your abilities are. So you can learn it. Scott, anything you wanted to add about content or where we're going with it, or just take any questions?
yeah, I think Don had a question here. It says, you may have discussed this, but would there be any way to deliver, oops, hang on, it scrolled on me. Deliver this in an online web-based fashion. Yeah, we should talk about that. You want to talk about that?
Sure. So I've done it via Zoom. As far as the web-based, well, two things here. One, delivering it electronically. And I want to be sure, online web-based fashion. Someone suggested early on that we just publish all the materials and let people go to a website and click through it themselves. There's lots of stuff out there already like that. That is not this. This is designed to put people together to learn hands-on skills and demonstrate their ability to do them. That's just not going to work in a web-based environment. I think Scott and I both have done a Zoom class or two now. It is tricky. It's limiting, but it also can be done. The toughest part that I think we have to deal with in that is checking the radio programming. Because we'll put up a 217 or a 205 and ask you to program what's in channel 8. And that may be a repeater frequency with a tone-coded squelch on the receive side. So you've got to get all this in there. And then I need to check to make sure that you actually did that properly. In class, I just program my radio with the opposite, as if it were the repeater. And then I let people program, and as soon as their voice comes out of my radio, we know that they've got the right tone, the right offset, the right frequency, and it's working. That's tough to do over Zoom. If we have to keep doing this, electronically, we may just have to take 20 inexpensive radios and pre-program them with the opposite of what we're asking the student to do, and then have them demonstrate in front of us via Zoom that it's coming out the speaker correctly. But as far as web-based, just learning on your own thing, this is just not that.
When we did ours, fortunately for me, it was actually, we'd scheduled it as with a physical group. So it wasn't we kind of postponed it a little bit to see if we could actually get back together. That wasn't happening. So we ended up making it a virtual class, but it was nice because all but 2 people in the class were all in one place. So we actually took one of our radio caches and we programmed it up with, like we do in class, with the 213, and I was able to deliver it to them, and they passed out all their radios. So they had one of our radios and they had their own, and the goal was to see if they could talk to our radio, and that was easy to demonstrate on the screen. But yeah, without that, I was pretty happy with how it turned out. One, the new content that we put together, we wanted to make sure there's an exercise. We do an exercise after each chapter, so it's not just it's not death by PowerPoint. We have an actual activity that we do after each chapter, and the programming exercises went quite well. And a lot of these things, actually, the interactivity of it, I think, is much better than we had in the past, and people kept engaged the whole time. We did break it up. When we do a physical class, we do 2 full days. And in this case, we broke it into 4 days because just, 8 hours of sitting in front of a screen doing Zoom stuff seemed cruel. We weren't willing to do that to people. But we did it in the evenings. We did Tuesday, Thursday evenings for 2 weeks or a couple of weeks, and 2 weeks, right? Yeah. And we actually got done a little early, and it went really, really well. The piece you miss is that, looking over other people's shoulder and having them help you program your radio. It's a little harder to do that over Zoom, where you can only have one person talking at a time instead of a group in the back huddled around their Baofeng trying to get it programmed.
Okay, another question there. I didn't speak to the ICS requirements. We do require 100, 200, and 700 be completed for them to receive the certificate. We don't really want to be the keeper of the certificates. We're kind of trusting people to tell us that they've completed them, or perhaps the agency that they're representing can vouch for those. But we do ask that 100, 200, and 700 be completed by the students prior to getting the certificate.
So any estimate how often students would need to recertify? We were discussing this. Our recertification process basically just has, we just have them provide us information that shows they don't have to retake the class. They just have to show that they stay engaged with their group and they've done some amount of training. So we want to make sure that they're still, if they just go away for 3 years and then pop back up and say, I want to recertify, if that's not really sufficient, right? They need to be engaged and be doing training with their own local teams in order to maintain kind of currency. And I don't know, this becomes complicated if people are far outside the area. If you wanted to try and do we have a hard enough time, and I think this is true, well, certainly true with Auxcom and some of these other courses, right? It's hard enough getting people in the classes, getting the classes scheduled and getting people in the classes initially. It'd be more difficult to actually force people to actually take the class again. So we're trying to figure out the best way to do that. Plus, we don't necessarily want to be the arbiters of what's acceptable and what's not. And so it might be easier if we just say, here's our certificate with the date on it, and your agency, group, team, whatever can decide whether that's appropriate and how often you might need to do something and what that might look like. So since this is Dan is asking, since this is a nationwide presentation, how does it help those outside your local area? Darren, you want to do that?
No.
Okay. Well, so now that we're doing things virtually, it's actually reasonable enough for us to hand off the class. People can actually take the course online. We can go through the train the trainer materials and show people how to get hooked up to the website, and you could start delivering this. Well, you could deliver this anywhere, or we could do it the old-fashioned way, which is what we did in California, where they were gracious enough to fly us down to California and put us up for a weekend, and we delivered the course down there. And
Scott and I do like to travel.
And so we're perfectly willing to do that if you'd like to buy us a couple plane tickets and find a place for us to stay. They actually offered us some bunks in a fire station, and then they ended up putting us in a hotel. Either one of those would have been acceptable, actually. But yeah, we had a good time. It was interesting to travel down and meet a bunch of people doing some slightly different things. The course was well received. It had a pretty broad audience. We had some hospital. My favorite piece was we had some hospital folks there that thought the mapping stuff was probably too much for them because they know where the hospitals are. And of course, that's great if all they ever do is hospitals, but if they wanted to do something else that might be more relevant. We also had some Coast Guard auxiliary folks in there going, if you had some more navigation stuff in this course, that'd be fantastic. So we felt that since both people were equally unhappy, we were probably right on where we needed to be. What else do we have? Oh, Oscar apparently had to go to bed.
Yeah, you folks on the anybody near the right-hand side coast, bully for you. I'm not staying up too late, so sorry you have to stay up late enough to catch this. That's tough. Has anyone failed? That's an excellent question. I can think of one in the entire time that we've dealt with this class, and it was in Scott's state. We haven't had any failures down here. To throw that up at him. My history and background in a former life was in the fire service as a training officer. So I love instructional material, and I want to see people succeed. And I work really hard at seeing that. We had one guy that just could not put together the multiple choice questions, and we have two tests with different questions on them that we try to stagger around the room so that there's no working together. And he didn't pass the first one, and it was quite low in the retention of the material. So we said, would you like to take the second test and see? And he took that one, and it was also very low. And we offered to see if we could sit down and go through it with him to help him find out where the gap was. And he was so frustrated at that point, he just said, no, forget it, and left. That's the only one that I'm aware of that did not pass the test and was not able to complete the course. Where in California were we?
So with Central Valley, what was the town?
Basically Modesto area.
Yeah, I think, yeah, right. Yeah.
We have had folks, this is a skills-based deal. So you'll have people that struggle with programming the handheld, and they may take 10 or 12 times before they can actually demonstrate the ability to put a frequency with the proper offset tone and the right tone and save it in memory. But we will keep working with them until they can get that. That's the idea.
Okay, looks like Larry's got his hand up, but I'd like to make a quick comment. I put in a picture in the chat. You have to click on it. Without fail, when you're working on any kind of group activity, you're going to end up with a handheld that belongs to somebody else. You haven't got a clue what to do with it. And so I ran across this handheld, which this book. It's available in many different sources, and it's got the picture by picture. It's a thick book, low spending between $25 and $30. That thing covers all the major handhelds, including some of the oddball things that we found or we stick our nose up in. And that is a handy thing to have when you're on an exercise. It can save. It can make a radio that nobody knows what to do. They throw it aside, usable. So I just threw that in. And Larry, would you like to ask your question?
Well, you kind of answered it. Because you have a plethora of the inexpensive radios out there. That's part of it. And the other part was when you're dealing with it, I noticed you talked about some digital work. Is there any particular one you push like WinLink or NEBS or anything like that?
When we get to the advanced topics, we're going to have to discuss those various modes. WinLink being one of the most popular. I don't see us diving into how to build and operate D-Star / Fusion Wires X / DMR.
Right.
I think that's going to be a fairly complicated arena. We're really after basic communication skills here and something that's transferable everywhere. So if we were to go into one region, they may be extremely heavy in D-Star, and that's all they care about there. So coming in and showing them a Wires X or Fusion solution or something isn't going to be of interest. So we're trying to keep it very generic. And I think WinLink is about the most accepted digital platform in that. Obviously, like I said before, it was very hard to deliver when we first did it. It'll be tougher now because we've got more sound card modes to deal with. So not only will we need to explain that TNC if you use a hardware modem solution, but we've also got to talk about the sound card interface and various different modes for that. So the more complex it gets, the tougher it does get to deliver. The name of the book. I think if you just go on Amazon and type my name in, my wife pointed out that the book pops up. Darren Wilson. And it's the Oregon ACES basic certification book. That is the old material that's on Amazon right now. Once we get this revision of the material dialed in, and we will produce a new book. I've probably got a box of 30 of these in the closet, so don't spend any money. If you want one of these, send me an email and I'll drop it in an envelope and send it to you if you want to see the old material before we finish this revision.
I think the revision, the nice thing about, I'm pretty happy with how the revision came out, right? We've had an opportunity to deliver the course over, 10 years now. It gave us a huge, we've done some minor tweaks to it, but the content itself remained largely unchanged. We would speed through certain parts and slow down for certain parts just to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to kind of emphasize the parts. We had some duplicate areas, and so we would try to accelerate some of those things. And this time, I think we got a much better focus. The content is current, and there's really very little duplication, or there's a little bit of emphasis maybe on a few things, but no duplication. And the content is there's more valuable content. There's some new things in there that I think are also more valuable than what we had in the past. I hate to even show people the old book. I want to finish the new book.
Right. And it's a struggle. We both have jobs, so doing this, we're trying to get it wrapped up so we can finish the thing. Honestly, when Oxcom was trying to decide whether we were going to be ACES or AECs or ECs, we kind of needed to know, because that affects every chapter in the book. We want to make sure that we align our terminology with what the current Oxcom direction is. So started out saying, we're going to be emergency coordinators was what they thought. Then was maybe going to be auxiliary emergency coordinators. And we got to go change everything in the book to match that. So hopefully we're dialed in with that as well. We want it to, we want no conflicts between our curriculum and our material and the Oxcom material. Not finding the book on Amazon.
Darren Wilson. I haven't ever looked.
Sorry, let me grab that real quick and see. Don't buy it.
I found it easy enough.
I'll send you one. Just drop me an email and I will put it in an envelope and send it to you.
Make sure that they spell your name correctly. I found it easy enough.
That is correct. Daron. Well, interesting.
Yep.
Maybe I didn't spell my name right. Maybe.
Somebody dropped it in there for you.
Okay, good. Yeah,
It's in the chat.
it didn't pop up this time. All right, thanks. Honestly, if you want to look at the previous book with the material, if you're just curious, N7HQR at OregonACES.org was on the last slide there. Drop me a note, and I think my address, another address is on QRZ if you want to look it up there, but drop me a note. I'll put one in an envelope and send it to you. I can stick that in here too.
There we go. Any other questions? Not seeing any new. Kind of easy. We would love to show it off a little bit. I was kind of hoping we'd have something we might be able to show. Certainly a book. We're so close to getting books done, but the COVID stuff is kind of slowing us up, so it's annoying.
I didn't think of that excuse. That's a good one.
Well, that's my problem. Is yeah, like I'm actually a part-time employee with our local emergency management group, and I have been working overtime, like real overtime for more than a year now. So it's hard to find free time to get this done. Now, I don't know what Darren's excuse is, but
it takes time, and you know, it's kind of like anything else you put together. As you read through it, you think, well, it's just about there, and then you find something and think, well, boy, I better read through one more time, and sooner or later you have to just walk away and say that's as close as it's going to get, and we'll produce a product again. The last one we did pretty good with for 10 years, so just a chance to get this one dialed in a little better and produce a similar product that can be handed off. I think that's all we got, unless there's any other questions.
No, popping right now and put a scan out there. Barry, do you see anything that we're missing?
Nope, we're up to date.
Okay. Are there any comments? Anything to add, subtract, or multiply in this presentation? Oh, Diana, you got your hand up. Go ahead, take it.
Hey, let me turn my video on. I just wanted to thank both of you. That was a wonderful presentation. I really like how you put the material together. I love your approach in the classroom. I'd love to teach with you guys sometime and be with you and your students. It's one of my favorite ways to organize an experience of learning. So thank you very much.
You bet. Where are you in Nevada?
I am on the Carson Indian Colony in Carson City.
I spent 3 years in Carson City. I'd come down there and help you put on a class.
Great. Anytime you want to come through, I'll let people know. And in fact, if you guys want to come through, I can let local people know. Maybe you'd like to do a presentation and meet our ARES group. We have 3 counties that are very close together. So we have 3 main ARES groups. And I'd love to introduce you. We also have quite a few clubs. So
Okay. Well, I was just down in Reno for the air races, but didn't get over into Carson City this time, but certainly have friends and folks there. So we would definitely look at doing that.
Okay, now I'm the one who sent you the pre-presentation instructor letter, so you've got my email.
Okay.
My phone number.
Excellent.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
thank you.
Yes, it looks like Paul's got his hand up.
There, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. This might sound a little different to some of you, but in order to find a place where you could teach some soldering to some of the people, I can remember back when my late wife used to go to quilting classes. Some of them have enough electricity. You might be able to plug in some soldering irons because they're always using sewing machines and irons, which take a lot of power, and a lot of them have pretty good facilities as far as the amount of room.
Okay, thank you. That's a very good point. The first thing that we did to try to counter our problem we had with that was we started producing some videos, and we did a soldering video that was about seven or 8 minutes long, professionally produced, well, mostly except for me soldering, showing a PL259 on a piece of coax, a DE9 serial connector, and an RCA phonotype plug or something. And that was what we were leaning towards, using some of those videos to show the actual skills in front rather than have to try to do them in person. But again, I still think people should know how to solder. And at some point you should be able to demonstrate that. We did the same thing with some HF stuff as well, because you may not be able to have an HF radio and decent antenna in the room all the time.
Okay, Paul, you got your hand back up.
Yeah, this was for a separate question. I could use a good reference for when I'm crimping various devices, the wire, the different little devices, and the actual proper tool and technique. I'm finding I'm going to have to start looking that up. Maybe some of these people who do it professionally could teach us just the art of crimping, proper selection of all the materials, and the ratcheting crimping tools. I need those for my hand strength.
So are you mostly talking about RF connectors?
No, I'm talking about just good old automotive connectors, even the little
Okay.
rings, spades, Anderson power connectors, not the RF stuff, just
Okay.
the general 12-volt automotive stuff as a
Yeah.
separate field.
Yeah, we tried to show ring terminals and fork terminals, and I usually bring a pile of that kind of stuff in with my props and some pieces of wire, and you just get different the class depending on the students. Some folks want to do more, some folks don't, but I try to have that stuff. I've usually got it with me so that we can strip a piece of wire, put a connector on, and see how the tool works to crimp it. I think that's an important part of the sharing that we can do when we're together in person like that. So we try to include as much of that as we can. For me personally, I try to query the students day number one to find out what kind of things they'd really like to see and do. And then I can bring that stuff the second day if we're doing a weekend, so they get the chance to crimp or solder or whatever they want to mess with on the side. We
did in California. It was funny because we mentioned the tiger tails, right? The little, we have a ring terminal that drops the counterpoise thing, right? And we described that. And the next day, the second day, one of the guys brought in a spool of wire and a bunch of ring terminals and a crimper, and he sat there during the class and crimped up a bunch of tiger tails for everybody. It was pretty funny.
I might make a comment at this point. I have helped my wife. She's a decorative artist, and during the pandemic, they couldn't meet, and they had their art classes they want to continue. They had national artists, actually worldwide, from Russia and other places. And these guys, they wanted to do that, and so with the document camera, they were able to, and I'll explain document camera if we need to here, they were able to show all the paint strokes, how to mix their paint, everything. And it was very beneficial. It would work very, very well for learning how to solder and so forth. It's a technique that is still used today. And although some of them have gone back to in-person classes, the in-person classes are now combined between in-person and Zoom because of the ability that they had doing that. There's something to keep in mind. You can do without being in class, holding their hand, saying, point your finger.
Absolutely. Yeah, my home setup here, I'm not using that feature for this, but I usually run OBS Studio, which is a software suite, and I've got 3 cameras plus a document camera, and it allows you to build scenes that you can switch between. So I can zoom in with that document camera on a circuit board, and we have a once a month Wednesday night workshop where we build some components. We've built dummy loads and little 75 meter tiny transmitters, transceivers, and I do the whole soldering thing right there under that document camera. So you can see the parts inserted and the soldering and the pieces, the leads cut off, and then we make the thing run. So you can share a lot of that. Takes a little bit of work, but it can certainly be shared via Zoom or one of the other platforms.
Well, also for those that online training has become a very necessity thing. There's a lot of people that don't want it. They want to go back to person. That's where they're at. That's all that maybe where you're at there too. It's much more valuable to you as in person. But online training spreads it out. It gets people who otherwise could not be involved. And it's worth the extra effort to try to put that kind of stuff together so you can get this stuff spread out and people learning things where, rural areas is a good example. You get outside, these folks have got the same kind of needs. And so by even doing a combo in-house in the online thing, but I personally feel it's an important part of our structure now. It's the new norm, if you will.
Yes, no, I completely agree. I'm looking forward to getting back into some local, in-person meetings, but we've already decided for our group that once we're allowed to meet together again, we're still going to run the Zoom platform side by side. We've got folks that don't want to get out at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night and drive quite a ways to go to a meeting, but they'll certainly sit in front of their computer and join and interact. So we'd like to try to do both when we get things back together.
Sounds like a plan. Are there any more questions out there? Barry had to leave, so I'll leave it up to you guys to keep an eye on chat to make sure we're not missing anything in chat.
Newsletter that you can subscribe to. We do not. We do have a place you can go on the website to be added to our mail list. We do not send anything out on that mail list unless it's critical. When we get the revision done, we'll shoot something out on that. If you signed up to receive information from us, you're probably going to get 2 or 3 things a year because we don't like that spam kind of thing. So, but we do have a place on the website you can click and put your address in there. And then when we send something out, it'll go to everybody on that.
I'm sure there's a lot of people appreciate that. The near nature of what we do, I end up sending out several times a week, several hundred emails. And so some people are, they get kind of bombarded. They don't want that. I understand that. I also do not know any other way for them to know what's coming up the following week and given that kind of stuff. Okay, we've chatted along here now enough to make sure that everybody's had second thoughts, third thoughts, and fourth thoughts. One more holler. Is there any questions or comments out there? None noted. Well, with that, I want to thank both of you. It's been a great presentation. It sounds like you got a really good show on your hands there, and it's just going to grow on it. There's a lot of need for that. So, and hopefully this presentation getting out there will get that known to other places as well for you.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. We appreciate the opportunity to share it here, and thanks everybody for giving us a platform for a bit.
You're quite welcome. And you might get back with this in the future as you grow this thing out. Let us know and we'll get you back on here again so you can give us an update.
You bet.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to pull the plug. Now then, as usual, I leave this open. After I pull the plug, everybody goes away. If you just go right back in again like you came the first time, you'll be able to chit chat and visit among yourselves and share. So I leave it open just for that reason. With that in mind, I'm going to say 73s, and I'm going to close this out. Maybe.
Thanks.
Well, my screens are all over the place here. There's my little baby. Okay, 73s, everybody.